So let's move on then to the question of if this is a third revolution and it needs to move and it will move and change society in different ways, how should we view that? And I had the privilege of co-chairing with Tom Conley from DuPont a study from the National Academy of Science called The New Biology for the 21st Century, a little bit of a pretentious name, but we had a group of very diverse people sit down and look at where biology is at the moment and ask about where it will go and what we need to think about in terms of achieving some of the advantages of what has happened over the past 50 and 60 years. And as has been made before, the committee quickly came to the point that current research, in large part genomics, has brought us to a point where all biological science and subdisciplines of biological science now have a common language, a common way of sharing information, a common way of theoretically dealing with problems. And this has been made possible by the ability to do high throughput sequencing. And that this information has led us to the possibility of integration of life science with broader activities in terms of taking advantage of this science and extending both the science and the impact of that science on society. And we phrase some of these questions in the context of 4 urgent problems, and let me comment on those at the moment. So new biology could affect urgent problems, and one problem that is facing us as a society is the need to produce enough food to accommodate nourishment to accommodate what is anticipated as 9 billion people by mid-century. And that is part of a biological, research as part of the answer to that in terms of what is needed is more genetically informed breeding and higher yields and more productivity, more specifically, out of the plant and agricultural industry. Much of that is coming from just more informed, genetically informed breeding of plants. It is the case that we have been able to increase the yields out of agricultural crops from 1% per year, which has been the increase over the last 50 or so years, to with about 10 years ago, it increased to about 2% a year, simply by the fact of following the nature of genetic activities and high throughput physiological assays. We need to be able to recognize that more important biodiversity in terms, and use biodiversity in terms of our agricultural activities, and to analyze crops as an ecosystem as well. Because the microbiome, which lives on our body, there's a microbiome around every plant, and the health of that plant is in some ways influenced by that microbiome. If you look at another challenge that we see over the next coming decades that everybody would agree on, is that human activities are stressing and altering and destroying ecosystems that we rely on. And we need to enhance the way we understand these ecosystems and be able then to control them. And again, this is being impacted by genomics and the new science, and will impact how we look at ecosystem dynamics. What is needed is a more comprehensive and quantitative measure of ecosystem services. What does ecosystems provide to us? It's hard to quantitatively determine that, but we need to understand that. Monitoring and early markers of ecosystems at risk. And microbial levels of analysis of ecosystems is incredibly important, because it is at that level that the first changes in dynamics in an ecosystem can frequently be seen. Fundamentally, understanding ecosystems restoration, and even developing a science of ecosystem engineering. All of these are problems that bring biology into the context of this urgent need in society, and will be impacted and has been impacted in terms of genomics and the ability to understand biological systems in a more general way. Obviously, one of the other urgent needs that we have coming in the coming decades is to move our consumption of transportable fuels from non-renewable to renewable resources. And this involves things like synthetic biology that Eric has already mentioned. And this, to succeed in this endeavor, one of the answers to it will be to increase the conversion efficiency of biomass into transportable fuels. And by biomass, I don't mean corn, I mean crops that can actually be generated specifically for conversion into consumable and transportable fuels. And to do that, we're going to need a whole series of advances in biological systems, including the ability to engineer biological systems. And as you heard it from Eric, in terms of a future endeavor, this engagement of synthetic biology with designs of regulatory systems that are then substituted intact into microorganisms or other more complex organisms that carry out conversions between feedstock and fine chemicals and drug products and transportable fuels is an area in which the impact of our knowledge of biology is going to be used, as he said, in a virtual cycle to advance both biological understanding and the advances in terms of societal impact. And finally, as we have talked about today, another urgent problem is to be able to deliver health care in a more effective way, both in terms of delivery and treatment of the patient and in terms of understanding the nature of diseases and to be able to individualize the use of treatments in advancing those diseases. And when we look at that, what we need then is new networks that monitor, report, and react to changes in health, thus enabling surveillance. This is something that is ongoing, a new technology that will in real time monitor the health of people and allow intervention early before there is damage that cannot be reversed, and to develop new conceptual and technical capacity to monitor and determine in high throughput ways phenotypes that then can be analyzed in specific fashion to identify disease states. And as I commented at the beginning, though these look like very divergent problems in society, they're actually, when you look underneath of them, there is one biology that is the same science that supports all of these missions. And some examples of that in terms of just only listing a few of many from the technology point of view is information technology and infrastructure, which is going to be central to advances in all of those areas. High throughput technology, which integrates engineering into collecting of information and analyzing it and creating models and understanding it, is an integral part of all that, all the way from individualized medical care to ecosystem monitoring. And then in a biology, it is actually the same biology in a variety of different settings. The same biology in understanding genotype and phenotype connections, either in a microbial system, in a network of microbial systems, in a microbiome, or in specific interactions and signaling pathways in our cells as they undergo changes in diseases. The ability to understand biodiversity and use that knowledge in both ways of advancing breeding and synthetic biology, but in ways of understanding the evolution and change in the genome so that we can identify critical components that we can then think about intervening in, and then networks that unravel and apply complex systems logic in terms of designing and understanding the interaction of large components of systems. These are problems that engineering has dealt with in a variety of other venues and will deal with in important contribution in our own science of life science. Now, I won't comment further, but I will say that not only do we need to understand this emerging convergence of engineering and physical science in terms of our science, but we also need to understand that it is going to impact on how we train and need to train people. We need, as Eric has commented, more central, automated, and shared facilities, of more computational skills in our sciences, in our core shared technologies, more students from engineering and computer science, more students mentored by engineering and computer sciences. It will evolve from a closer relationship to the private sector and to philanthropy, which is ongoing and is shown by that diagram of our illustration of the relationship of MIT to the cluster in Kendall Square. And as you've heard from Eric, there will be increasing uses of large team science in achieving many of these ends. So I will not go through, sorry, I'm stuck here. I won't comment further on what I anticipate will be changes in education that are required, but I leave you with the thought that we have come through two revolutions, the last one at least being the genomic revolution, and it has set us in a position where, as we move forward in looking at the impact of biological science and the promise of biological science in societal issues, that this science is going to move laterally and forward with greater engagement of engineers, physical science, and computational science in translating what we know now and discovering new things in the future in terms of benefits in society. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharp, for encouraging us to take roads less traveled for the future in working together. Now let's take a couple of questions from the audience. I see Tom Hudson at the back. No, please.
Yeah. It's Pete Desai, and a couple of excellent presentations and pointing out how this science and evolved and the quantum leaps that it has made. So if I could just ask the question about, you mentioned about how these things are impacting other sectors of life sciences and the technologies that you have made huge quantum leaps in the health sector of the applications. Can you comment, and Eric's point about how these technologies have not only improved the concept, but the cost has gone down and so on, and the impact on health? And then on life sciences, can you see how other life science like agriculture and forestry could gain from this, and how this two sciences can really help to make agriculture learn from the advances of the technology and how it can do it faster than it has been in the past, the applications?
As my comments I tried to make, but I made them very briefly, the genomic revolution has first had an enormous impact in biomedical science. Actually, it's having an equivalent impact in plant science in terms of advancing crop yields, but it could be advanced much more rapidly than it is now because we're woefully underinvested in bringing this science to application in plant biology. So whereas there are multiple people, for good reasons, studying the nature of diseases in the US, the investment in plant biology is at least 1/30 of that in biomedical science. So the integration of this information and this technology would just, I believe, have an enormous advance in plant biology and plant production, agriculture.
Take a question on the left and then later the center.
Thanks again for a very nice talk. So You point out that there will soon be 9 billion people on the planet, and a billion of them probably hungry. So that's kind of in conflict with diverting a lot of agricultural capacity to biofuel. But there's still enormous potential for biofuels, and I'm just wondering, how do we get that balance right?
Well, I think we have a major problem with distribution of food right now. But the issue, if you look forward in time, if we are able to continue to advance our agricultural output, and particularly create crops that will grow in environments that we cannot grow crops now, either due to salinity or lack of water or others, using gene stock, let's say, that are parts of the natural flora there. I think we can expand the production of agricultural products at a higher yield and lower impact on ecology using this technology over coming decades. At the same time, I believe we're going to use the technology and need to use the technology for increased production. So I don't see those of biofuels and transportable fuels. I don't see those sciences necessarily competitive or developments competitive. I see them complementary if we apply the technology and knowledge we have and move it forward in those areas.
Thank you, please.
20, 25 years ago, there were 3 mega projects in science that were vying for mega dollars. There was the about $2 billion each. One was the Hubble telescope, the other was the superconductor, super collider, and the third was the human genome. And they were all roughly about the same price tag, and I think both the Hubble and the human genome sort of went forward. Do you see, or Dr. Lander, do you see a next $2 billion project coming out of these ideas as a sort of a focus of attention?
I think, you mean coming out of life science? Yes, there will be increasing need to make commitments of that nature, but the unique aspect of the human genome, which is hard to duplicate, is that it was a human genome, right? The genome of everyone. And that was the final, goal to put on the wall and then to measure your progress to. It was like putting a man on the moon. It was a goal that you could measure your progress to.
That's right.
And as of now, articulating a similar goal with a final point as definable as that has been difficult. And it is one of the things that makes it a greater challenge to communicate the opportunities in science for future investments. But Eric is a good craftsman of words, as you've heard, and he may have this next human genome.